Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the Heretics Review Show. I have here with us our co-host, Andrews Croft. Myself is Nick Ho, and that's our stage name, by the way. So, um, anyway, so this week is going to be a very interesting, I would say, interesting a presentation here. Let me share my screen really fast here. And I understand that our faces are shrunken for whatever reason. My program doesn't seem to like to enlarge our faces, but we see here, it is our fourth topic, intelligence. Actually, we're going to go after the movie Pi from 1998. Here's a little glimpse of it. Forced to share a bed with this genius, and this is so. Here's a bunch of information about the definition of intelligence, genius, and so on and so forth. So this is going to be a free form, but we are going to talk just a very little bit about this movie, Pi, and it is a 1998, I guess. I would say it's a mind-bending thriller, and it was actually pretty good because it was done all in black and white, and it made it look like it was from the 50s or 60s. However, it was done in the late 90s, and it was about a guy who was considered a higher-end thinking mathematician of the time who had problems with his mental health. But he was really good at mathematics, and he tried to find the ultimate, God equation to solve the stock market. So why this very specific thing about the stock market and mathematics, I'm not really sure. The movie itself is actually very noir, I guess they called it back then, and avant-garde, and all these other, French type terms that really nobody has a solid definition on. But what I saw was a jumbled mess that was fairly artistic. So what do you think about that movie, Andrews?
Well, I'll admit some confusion as it relates to the topic of intelligence, because I actually thought that pi was almost a definition of the opposite of intelligence. And had very little to do with it at all. So it's either nothing at all to do with it, or actually its opposite. So I understand the idea in that they're presenting the character as an intelligent person who has mathematical genius. However, what actually goes into the movie doesn't really fit that. It doesn't fit it from the perspective of what mathematics is. I mean, it's kind of like, it feels to me like someone who doesn't really know that much about the subject writing something of what they envision that it's supposed to be like, but that's not really how it works in any way. There's no part of that story that relates to the real world, and I think that's kind of the point, is that if we kind of have to start at the definition of what intelligence is, and I think if we define that, then we can see. Hold on. Then we can see how this movie doesn't reflect that at all. And as far as the movie goes itself, I felt like this was a movie with a very abstract concept of intelligence that wants you to believe in the intelligence of the protagonist, but in no way is it evident through the story. So it was really someone who's just dealing with, and I would say a very Hollywoodized version of mental health. And I kind of dislike that, because whenever you see mental health portrayed in Hollywood, it's always a very fantastical version. And I think that's very destructive, because, it's a real thing that people really deal with. And when we always see portrayals of it in such crazy ways that are completely unrealistic, I think it does a tremendous disservice to people with mental health, or to mental health in general, to have it associated in such a bizarre and unrealistic way. So I hated the movie. I thought it was terrible from beginning to end.
I do agree with the fact that Hollywood does Yeah, I mean, Hollywood does seem to portray mental health victims, I guess, as something to be kind of like objectified. You know, you're looking at Rain Man, you're looking at A Beautiful Mind. You know, these are all quote unquote geniuses, and yet they're right on the kind of like the cliff of, you know, intelligence, madness, or whatever it
Well,
is.
but that's a fantasy. That's I think the central fantasy of the movie is that there's a connection between intelligence and quote unquote madness. So
Yes.
this is a fantasy and it's absolutely untrue. And I think one of the things that we can go to easily to see that is Bobby Fischer. So
Mhm.
Bobby Fischer is a chess prodigy. You know, obviously everyone knows who he is, and someone who clearly struggles with mental health throughout his entire life. However, you know, that is what gives that narrative, you know, like fuel to say, oh, well, look at Bobby Fischer because he struggled with mental health, and that was the connection between his genius and, you know, quote unquote madness. But I mean, honestly, if you go through the world of chess, you find, you know, that he is an incredible exception to the rule. Magnus Carlsen, who's currently the world's chess champion, has no such issues, nor do 99% of other chess players, because 1% of the world's population, or a small percentage of the world, not 1%, don't get me wrong, some small percent suffer from the same thing that Bobby Fischer does. He just happens to be a chess player who suffers from that. It's not because he's a chess player. It's not because he is a chess genius that he suffers from that. It's just a coincidence that he happens to both be a chess player and suffer from the conditions in which he suffers. Um, but plenty of people are chess geniuses that don't have that.
Yes.
And so we just look at that one example in order to form a narrative and say, aha, well, you know, if you're one of those chess geniuses, you're probably a crazy person. And then we go and look around and you see movies upon movies upon movies. And if they feature a chess
Exactly.
genius, quite naturally that person has to be crazy, you know. And
You
it's
can't be a genius unless you're, you know, insane or something. You
yeah, and
know.
I use crazy in the sense not that they have mental health, because it's rarely portrayed accurately, you know, as a truly a mental health issue, but crazy in terms of just being like randomly afflicted by something that makes no sense.
Yes. Yes. I agree with that. I think Hollywood, um, you know, in order for it to be a suspenseful and thrilling movie, they have to have very unique individuals, very like one in a million, you know, type storylines. And the problem with that is that when you present this in a specific way like this over and over and over again to the general public, uh, people start to, you know, link that in their heads. Oh yeah, you know, he's a savant. He's very smart, but he has mental health issues. Well, you know, not everybody that is quote unquote smart has mental health issues. Okay, it's a very small percentage, like you said, and so I think it is a disservice to. It's a matter of fact, it actually makes it more of a problem for society to move on, to go forward with, you know, trying to figure out how to solve, or not even solve, how to be aware of mental health issues, just because it's just being portrayed over and over again as, well, you know, if you're this, then you're also this, which is not usually the case, like you said.
Yeah, your Rain Man example is a really good one, because that's one of those portrayals that says, okay, well, people who are autistic are also naturally some kind of mathematical genius. And of course, it's not so, that these are entirely coincidental things, that a person can be both, but not because of one affects the other.
Yeah.
You know, there was a movie with Jamie Foxx, I can't remember the name of this movie, where he too was some kind of a person with autism or something like that, but who happened to be like a fantastic violin player or cello player. You know, and that was the whole premise of the movie. And now we have Moon Knight, uh,
Oh no.
which is awful because it does the exact same thing, is it makes mental health into, you know, something that's convenient for a superhero to have.
Yeah.
You know, and that to me is like saying, well, you know, your broken arm could actually be a superpower, you know. And it's it's like that's what mental health is. Mental health is when there's something going on with you that is it is what's the word, dysfunctional. Something is going on in your space, in your mental health, that is dysfunctional to your life. It specifically does not serve the purpose of that you need it to in your life. And so to then say, okay, well, Moon Knight's little dissociative identity disorder can actually be a superpower is ridiculous. It's terrible. That's just not what. That's not no.
That's a very unique perspective on dissociative disorder.
But pi has the same thing. It's like that somehow that it works both ways. That you have creative genius, and then you have mental health problems, and that they feed each other. That mental health problems somehow make you more genius, or something like that.
That actually brings up another movie that has a guy with dissociative personality disorders, where he thinks he's multiple personalities, and each one has a different superpower, right? You can talk about the movie Glass.
M. Night Shyamalan. Yeah.
What was it? Glass was one of them. The other one was what was it? Unbreakable or something like this.
Well, no, you're missing the key one.
The key one. I can't remember the name of that movie.
With James McAvoy.
Yeah, the guy
who plays the Beast. Yeah.
This is. I can't remember the name of that movie now.
Well, this
Split.
too.
That's it.
Split. This too gives this idea that mental health disorders can be associated with, like supernatural or above average performance in some areas. It's a savant kind of myth. That because I have a mental health disorder, I'm going to be super good at this other thing. Yeah. And no, that's not how it works.
So, but anyways,
it's just like saying that if I had a broken arm, that makes me better at something.
Yeah, you never know. You might have a superpower with a broken arm. Your other arm is stronger.
That's I mean, mental health and physical health are very similar in that respect, that if you're not in a good health space, it is going to be detrimental to everything you do. And that's the same with mental health, is where you're suffering from a disability, just like diabetes or heart disease or something like that. These are never positives. That's the whole point, is that you have to work to overcome a health ailment, and in this case, they're a mental health ailment, but it's never a positive. It's not going to help you become better at something. And that's the myth at Hollywood.
You're not going to be able to jump over tall buildings in a single bound.
Because you somehow have dissociative identity disorder. I think it's actually very harmful. I have to say that this whole thing, and I think it's harmful in the way that it's portrayed in Pi as well. It's harmful because it all of these kinds of like myths and stereotypes about mental health disorders, I think ultimately discourage people from receiving appropriate care, or create stigma around receiving care for that. The bottom line is that all of us, or most of us at some point in our life, will deal with mental health issues, and we should feel comfortable in addressing them and understand that they're a normal part of life, just like breaking your arm is a normal part of life. You may not want to do it, or may not want to deal with it, but at some point or another, you might break your arm. It's not your fault. It's just what happens. And so mental health is similar, that none of us seek it out, but it does happen to almost all of us. And at some point you'll have to address it, and it's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not a bad thing, but neither is it going to give you superpowers or contribute to your creative genius.
Yes. Yeah. So we got that out, and then circling back around, the movie Pi itself, outside of the fact that it's a kind of artsy fartsy, there's really not much of a storyline in there, not much of a plot. It talks about numerology, it talks about all kinds of stuff, but really in the end, it just, like you said, kind of falls flat. And there is no, at the beginning, it puts out a problem to solve, and at the end, it doesn't really solve anything. So
I think the key point to understanding how it fails is that it fails to understand what intelligence is. And I think that's something to talk about, and something we would probably spend more than one of these episodes talking about. But I would say that at a basis, and you're welcome to disagree with me, that intelligence is simply understanding reality. What is real, like what it is, like what's going on. So, that is your ability to understand the world
Okay.
and
All right.
what's
Yeah,
in it.
let's jump right into it. I wanted to share this really quickly right here. Here are just some definitions of intelligence or meanings of intelligence that I just
Yeah.
kind
So,
of gathered from.
and there it says, has been defined in many ways. So in
Yeah.
this case, what we're doing is we're defining it in so many ways as really that it's not really a concept at all.
So
It's
this is
so
the thing.
vague as to be,
Yes, this is the thing. There is no kind of like firm or proven or even validated definition of intelligence. It's kind of like life. How do you define life? Is a tree alive? Is a rock alive? Is fire alive? So it's the same thing with intelligence. You can see all kinds of stuff right here. Every scientific I guess department or scientific field, I guess, has the definition of intelligence as something different. Whatever they think intelligence is, it depends on their background or their perspective of what is intelligent. So it's kind of funny. It's kind of like describing a cube, from your perspective. If there's like 4 people standing around a cube, what does the cube look like to that person? What does a Rubik's cube look like to that person? No, it's all white. Oh no, it's all red. So what is intelligence? And so I think for me, and I wanted to just kind of expound on what I think intelligence is, because I think what I think intelligence is probably what the mainstream people think. And then we're going to go over and have Andrews explain his meaning of intelligence, or if there is any such thing as intelligence. So I pretty much titled this episode "Intelligence: To Be or Not to Be," right? So my kind of like concept of intelligence is that the ability for the brain, the human body, the human psyche, the human mind to gather stimuli as data, and then be able to comprehend it, and then process it and produce some kind of result or answer. Okay, it's very, very close to how a computer does it, except for with human beings, they're able to kind of process information that they get in a specific way, and then produce some type of answer or a solution, or just be able to understand a thing. And a lot of it has to do with sifting through all the amount of information that they do get inputted, and as quickly or as fast as they could, and produce some kind of solution. So that's pretty much the mainstream definition of what intelligence is. The more intelligent you are, the faster you can think, pretty much, with the amount of information that you get in. So someone who is considered intelligent in the mainstream sense is somebody who can, read a 1,000-page book and remember the most, and just be able to recall whatever, answer they need to answer, or formulate a new answer even. So this is what most people think of as intelligent. The guy is highly intelligent because he can, think up the number pi to the nth power or something like this, or the nth decimal point. So that is a kind of like a popular or mainstream type of concept of intelligence. So very boring, very, everybody knows, everybody thinks that's what it is, kind of answer there, or concept. And so when I first met Andrews Croft, we were working in an office, and it was actually a informatics office. So, it's an IT informatics office. And this is where everybody there is pretty darn smart. All right. They were all smarter than me. And they knew different things. Okay. They knew different things. Okay. And it was like, you got software developers, software programmers. I didn't think they were different things, but apparently they are. Software engineers, and then you got your health professionals and this and that. And so everybody was fairly smart. And we, in my mind, the IQ in there was very high. Now, what I didn't know was that Andrews had a different concept of what intelligence is, or the fact that intelligence is not a concept. So maybe Andrews, you can take over and just let us know what your perspective is on quote unquote intelligence.
Sure. Well, the easiest way is to compare and contrast with the computer. So how we are like or not like a computer processor. What a computer deals with are all finite data points, finite, definable. The problem, though, as it relates to making that comparison with a human being, is that we deal with no finite data points, or almost no finite data points, because we are exposed to the infinite, to infinity. That is to say that every circumstance in time is infinitely different from every previous circumstance in time. That even if you have the exact same thought at a different time, you've done so under different circumstances. Time, it's a river you never cross twice. So the problem with it being about data crunching is that there's an infinite amount of data, and literally an infinite amount of data. You can never, ever, ever get to the end of it. So, because that's what life is, that's what human experience is, it's infinite. And they say, for example, that a chessboard has basically infinite number of combinations, and that's 64 64 squares with 32 pieces, and that if you think about every possible combination of that, you wind up with a nearly infinite degree of permutations. But life is so much bigger than that, because now you think about every single person on this planet, you think about every possible element that's occurring, and that as it's occurring through time, it's absolutely an infinite possible combination of things that can happen. So therein lies the problem with making a parallel to processing, is that it's only remotely possible when you try to boil it down to things by eliminating the infinite possibilities. So you try to do something like pi, or something where there is a easily identifiable, discernible, finite mathematical or other way possibilities. So that is to say that what you're processing excludes the infinite possibilities, to say that it's just strictly a processing problem. So you can get to that, and you can say, okay, well, we're just going to deal with strictly processing problems. And in that way, you would say, well, how much alike is a person to a calculator? But I think that's a very, very limited view of intelligence, to say that comparing us to a calculator is what makes us intelligent. So if we say instead it is our ability to understand reality, to understand what is around us and the world in which we live, then there's no real way of measuring that, because that's an infinite possibility. There's no end to the spectrum there. And it also then, I think, to take it another step, is that the concept of intelligence, especially as you mentioned IQ, is really developed to create hierarchy where hierarchy does not exist. So people as humans like to do this. They like to say, oh, okay, well, Einstein was a 165 IQ. So if I am a 160 IQ, well, I'm right up there with Einstein. Go me, but that's not how it works. So we like to do this.
You're saying that the concept, if there is such a thing, the concept of intelligence is actually holding humanity back.
Yeah, I mean, it's done to create superiority in general, because it's almost impossible to have a conversation about intelligence without doing comparison. So to say I am more, like even when you gave your story about working with programmers, there's a lot of very high IQ. I am comparing myself and my intelligence to their intelligence. So this is what we constantly do, is we try to say, okay, we're going to define ourselves as a finite number. In this case, we say, okay, I took an IQ test, and that IQ test said I was 142 IQ. Then you took the same IQ test and you're 135. Oh, well, I'm 7 points higher than you. So good for me. So, but of course, this is nonsense. Because, I mean, if you think about it, if you just take a moment, imagine that there really is a finite concept of intelligence, just the way that you say, like IQ. How would it be possible for the person of lower IQ or lower intelligence to recognize the brilliance or the increased intelligence of a person of higher IQ? Right? You could only recognize people that fell within your ability to recognize them, which would be at your level or lower. How would you recognize someone who's more intelligent than you? How would you measure someone's intelligence if you cannot yourself operate in that space? You know, what if someone were 5 times as intelligent as you? What if they're 100 times as intelligent as you? How would you even know?
Okay.
You had no way of knowing. So
I see what you're saying. Like, how does an ant know what God is thinking, kind of thing?
yeah, how would you know? So it's but it's not like that, because we don't live in a linear hierarchy. We each have our own experience of reality, and we are each a reflection of our own experience of reality. And that's infinite. So there's no comparing infinite numbers. You can't say, well, you know, my infinite experience is greater than your infinite experience, because it's infinite. You came from, you represent your specific place in history and time, you know, what your background, everything about you is unique and infinite. And that's a beautiful part of humanity. But it's incomparable. And the people that are out there who then try to make that into a matter of comparison do so to create a sense of superiority. So those Mensa people out there, it's like, aha, I can solve this little missionaries and cannibals problem faster than you can, so that makes me super smart. So I get to feel good about myself because I'm super smart. You know, the story I like 2 stories about this. One story is about this kid and his mother. He wasn't featured on Time magazine as like young genius. You know, this is a kid that can like do an IQ test and score like 200 or something like that. And he can do so at the age of like 8 or 9 or 10, something like that, very young. So he scores this out, you know, and he's featured as one of the top geniuses, you know, young prodigies in America. And he gets sent to a school for these prodigies because he's so famous now for being super smart. So he gets sent to the school, and when he gets to that school, he's miserable and does poorly. And they're trying to figure out why, you know, what is it about this kid? I mean, he's obviously really smart. Why is he failing at everything and doing so and having such a difficult time? Well, the answer is that his mother had been training him specifically on the IQ test by feeding him the answers in advance so he could memorize them, so he could score really high on the IQ test so he could get famous for being smart. But then when he actually goes to the places where he's surrounded by other people who similarly are scoring high on these tests, he's miserable because, you know, he feels out of his league. You know, and there's this expectation that he has to set up to follow, you know, that he is like the smartest kid in America. It's a terrible expectation to put on a 10-year-old. And he fails at it, right? And so then for the rest of his life, he gets to be a fraud who faked being intelligent. You know, that's what his little life story is going to be now. And, you know, the other story that I would go to there is the guy who, it turns out that that IQ tests are competitive. And that there's some people who like Jeopardy champions that just study to take IQ tests so that they get the highest score possible. And, you know, there's always going to be a number 2 on that list, right? The guy who studied super hard and has a 225 IQ, but then, you know, falls second to the guy who has a 230 IQ, you know? And then he's like, well, I'm the second smartest person in the world.
Yeah, so actually those are very good and I would say novel, maybe not so novel, because apparently as I was looking into this topic, a lot of people actually have the same or similar viewpoints as you do on what intelligence or lack thereof is. And so maybe in the next episode we can go a little bit deeper dive into it.
I'm going to finish with one thing because I want to explain just briefly why pi is the opposite of intelligence.
Okay.
So if we say that our understanding of reality is actually our intelligence, our ability to understand our reality, and which is unique to each of us. So we each have our own reality. So therefore our intelligence will be unique in each of those situations. But pi is the opposite because we benefit from others, from our connection with others. We benefit from reading the works of others, from communicating with others. The getting other people's perspectives is how we understand our own reality because we see past our own blind spots. But he inevitably, in Pi, he kind of ends up doing the opposite. Rather than seeking help or, kind of connecting with the outside world, he burrows into himself and becomes obsessed with this like magical number that can solve everything. And where we look to magical solutions rather than looking to, broaden our perspectives, right? Where we narrow our perspectives rather than broaden them, to me is the opposite, is that our intelligence is served best by broadening our perspective, by seeking out the perspectives of others and understanding what other people feel and believe, rather than burrowing into our own psyche and just, insulating ourselves within our own mind, which is what I
Yeah,
feel like the protagonist does.
yeah,
So.
that's actually a very good analysis of that. He actually, yeah, you're right. So he actually doesn't expand his quote unquote intelligence, but he actually shrinks it. So, but anyways, so going forward, our time is almost up here. But in the next one, we can discuss more about why you think that how you can bring about making a comparison or non-comparison between, if there is such a thing, between someone who is better adept at a specific chore or a task. Does that make them smarter? Is smart even a thing? Isn't, you know what I mean? Like if somebody, because I've met a lot of people and a lot of people who are very good at a very specific skill set, right? And it's kind of like that movie Taken. He's just very good. I have a very special skill set, but when you put them out into society, for example, they're flopping around. You know what I mean? They don't know what to do. So like somebody who is very, very quote unquote smart at the academics, you put them in a social setting, they don't know what to do. So how do you determine then what is a smart person? Is a smart person someone who is well-rounded, or is a smart person someone who is specifically smart on a very specific subject? So some things like this we can discuss next time. But I think that what you've been saying kind of like really provoked me into thinking about, well, you know what, that makes a lot of sense, because people are quote unquote intelligent in only very specific things. They're not intelligent in everything. So it's very, very rare for someone to be a polymath, I guess. Somebody who is just kind of like really good at everything. Like what's that guy's name? Not Galileo, but Da Vinci. He's very good at a lot of
There's a
things.
guy in American history named Hershey. He I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Hershey. But he did a simultaneous exhibition where he got the masters of like several different types of games, like backgammon, chess, poker, you name it. And he got them all to sit in a circle, and he would go around and play each different game with each different person and beat the leader of that particular field.
Wow.
Like he'd play grandmasters and beat grandmasters. Then he'd go and play people who were good at Go and beat them. And what I'm saying? So he was this guy, in addition to all of that, of course, he speaks like 12 languages and, all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, he would be considered, really, really intelligent. But then, like, if you put him in a different setting where he's out of his element, he wouldn't be that intelligent, right? I mean, you look at Kyrie Irving of the NBA. He's just, an Einstein on the basketball court, but he's a flat earther. You know what I mean? He believes the earth is flat.
Dennis Rodman is easily one of the most intelligent basketball players of all time.
Yeah.
But outside the court.
Yeah, he's not that wise. He's not a wise man. So
question marks.
There is a lot of I think ideas of what people think intelligence is, but they really,
it becomes
really
easier
know.
when we just say that it doesn't exist. That It's just not a thing.
That is something you're going to have to prove.
And we stop comparing each other. We stop, and we can just embrace that we each have a different, unique experience that's, you know, that lends itself to the skills that express themselves in our own way. You know, even all chess players are not alike. Even all chess geniuses are not alike. They have different styles, different skills, and different abilities. Everyone's experience is different. And you know, some people, because of their life experience, has lent themselves to, you know, like chess geniuses, basically were a grandmaster by the age of 15, or they didn't make it. So that means that their experience up to the age of 15 is what really shaped their ability to become a grandmaster. And you can't just say, okay, well, I'm 40 years old, I'm going to become a grandmaster. It doesn't work that way, because your life has to support this concept. And for those people whose lives did support, and there were lots of them, then they became grandmasters. They went on to become good at this, but they did so because their life supported that concept. And you know, we each have our own unique path, and what is our life support for us? What is our best, you know, efforts and our most creative endeavors, and how are we? I mean, this is a fundamental question for all of us to kind of participate in, but it's not one that can be done through hierarchy and say that, well, you know, I'm worse at this than you are, or you're better at this than I am, and that matters. It doesn't matter. It matters that you get the most out of your life, and that's it.
So the concepts and the things you're talking about here, really it's like, you know, we have to I think kind of sort of re-educate ourselves. What's the word I'm thinking about when you unbrainwash somebody? There's a word for it. I can't think of it right now. But
it's the programming one. It's like deprogramming someone. Or,
yes, deprogramming.
Like when they're in a cult. When they're in a cult,
Yeah,
they get deprogrammed
exactly,
from that cult.
Exactly. So I mean, again, my definition of my mainstream concept definition of intelligence is basically what 99% of the people out there probably think intelligence is. You know,
when you enter into competition, and some form of the essence of your self-worth is part of that, you'll never be you know, there always will be someone better than you at anything you ever do. So you know, no matter how good you are at something, sooner or later there's going to be someone better than you. Even Magnus Carlsen, who's the top of the world at chess. So I use a lot of chess examples, but he won't always be. Someday he won't be. And then what happened? Did he stop becoming intelligent? You know, is he now, because he's number 2, is that mean he's less of a person?
You're right. No. I mean, if you get rid of the concept of intelligence, then everybody is level and different and unique, and you know, that actually, you know,
it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And not only that, but I mean, this hierarchy really plays into other things like racism, bigotry. I mean, everything, you know, like there's a reason why the Nazis were measuring the brain sizes of Jewish people, right? I mean,
chronology and whatnot.
So,
and I think that's where we have to really be cautious and take a pause with the concept of intelligence. Is just to recognize that it does have its history in prejudice, and even when we look at the IQ tests that are available today. I took an IQ test a long time ago when I was a kid, and one of the questions related to sad sack. And I was like, what the heck is sad sack? Well, it turns out sad sack is a cartoon, like a comic book character, but is a comic book character from the 50s. So if you're old enough to have read, you know, the newspaper and seen the Sunday comics and seen sad sack in those Sunday comics, then that would make sense to you. But if you're not, and you've never seen this, how is that a question? You know, so it's difficult to envision that even such a test could escape cultural biases, or could escape, you know, they can try to account for them, but to truly eliminate a bias on your background or your language, or, you know, everything about you is, I think, impossible.
Yeah, that's right.
And then
isn't an intelligence quotient or an IQ test all about bias?
Well, and if you recall, and this is what we should talk about, is we should talk about the bell curve, because if you recall, there was a book that came out a while back that tried to use IQ to validate, you know, prejudice, called the bell curve, saying like, oh, okay, well, if you look, then this group of minorities is on this side of the bell curve, and that group of minorities on the other side of the bell curve. That means that that group is smarter than this group,
No,
and
it's you're right. It's just right on point there. And intelligence and racism. Wow, people would never put that together, I don't think.
So, I mean, you just run into all kinds of problems because the truth is that this is inevitably an issue of superiority, and that's what we have to wean ourselves away from, is to say that, you know what, you have a unique experience. It's not better or worse than anyone else's. It's your experience, and that's what you need to focus on, is how do you get the most out of your experience? Forget about everyone else. Are you better or worse than John Doe across the street? Who knows? It doesn't matter, because they don't have your life. You have your life. And that's what, the focus should be, is how do I get the most out of my own capability and my own potential? How am I the best me I can be? And that's not going to be by comparing yourself to other people. It could be by benefiting from the wisdom of other people, because we can all benefit from the wisdom of other people. But it's not going to be by comparing yourself and saying, I am not as smart as that person, or I am smarter than this other person, because none of that matters. That's not a beneficial component of your life.
All right. So we'll do a deep dive and see how intelligence actually has hindered society in the next episode. So it's just, I think this is a great topic. So anyways, very, very novel idea for me, something that's probably been, that you've been thinking about your whole life. So, it's probably not new to you, but it is new to me. So I like it. So, all right, everyone. See you next time.
All right.